talked to a lot of people at church and so forth in the past couple of weeks, and they've come up, and a common theme that I've heard from a lot of people is, I need Lent. I'm looking forward to Lent. It's kind of an odd thing to say. But when I think about it myself, I personally, there's a part of me that is scared and doesn't want to do anything for Lent. But there's also a very big part of me that does look forward to this season. Coming off of the holiday season where I've probably had more to eat and more laziness and so forth than I probably should have indulged in. Coming off of the cold winter months where we typically feel a little bit more sorry for ourselves and allow ourselves to do things to take care of ourselves and to comfort ourselves. I know I've certainly done my share of those things in the past couple of months. And so I find myself being in a position where I need Lent. And I'm actually, in a weird way, looking forward to it. Another thing I think that has actually kind of encouraged me as we begin Lent, and this might seem strange, but it's Sheen. I don't typically follow a lot of the TMZs or the Entertainment Tonight types of shows. I'm more of a sports person. And the little bit of sports that I listen to, maybe it's sports radio on the way home, Sheen has even made it there. He's even being talked about there. And I think the thing that Sheen has reminded me of, whether or not it's an act, I don't know and I don't care. But I think the thing that this whole thing has reminded me of as I begin my Lent is that he personifies, either himself or the person that he's pretending to be, personifies to me what life would be like without ever having a Lent. Without ever having to give up anything. Having everything that I've ever wanted at my fingertips. What that life looks like is not beautiful. It is emaciated and crazy. I need Lent. And I think that you, if you think about it, might actually benefit from Lent as well. So what do we do during Lent? What do we do with this season? And then here I'd like to share with you a brief analogy that I was thinking of these past couple of days as I was preparing for Lent myself. I thought of the sport of wrestling. Now, I was never a wrestler. I wrestled for 1 hour of one practice, and then I quit in 7th grade. It was too hot. But I've been around wrestlers. My dad was a wrestler. My brother Tony, who used to teach here, was a good wrestler and used to coach here. And I've been around wrestling meets. And at every wrestling meet, what you'll see is there's a scale in a room before the meet. And you have young men lying down the hallway waiting to step onto the scale to make sure that they actually weigh the right amount. And if they don't, if they maybe snuck a Hershey's Kiss that afternoon or something and are now 2 ounces heavier than they're supposed to be, they have to leave and go jump rope and wear sweatpants and so forth to try and sweat off the extra 2.2 pounds. And then they can come back and try and weigh in again. For me, I think that that is a nice analogy for Lent. But instead of a scale, what it is in the room is the eye of a needle. And we have people lined up down the hall trying to pass through it to get into heaven. But in fact, oftentimes we find that we are not able or not worthy to get into the kingdom of heaven. And not that we somehow earn that, not that we somehow have to do enough in order to become worthy of heaven, but we look at that eye of the needle and we realize that we're not there yet and that we're called to more. And so instead of going out and running laps or jumping rope like wrestlers, we head to a different place. We head to the desert. We head to the desert. Jesus spent 40 days in the desert fasting and praying. So why do we go to the desert? I think one of the reasons that we go to the desert of Lent is because when we're in the desert, there's nowhere else to hide. The benefit of the desert is not that it's punishment, but that in the desert there is no shade. There is nowhere to hide from what we are, and we confront ourselves as we really are. The importance of the desert is not just that there's no food there, but that because Lent is not just about food. Today is not just about not eating. If you're thinking right now about the loopholes and the ways that you can get around this, and if you're instead of eating going to satisfy that need by spending 4 hours on Facebook or the internet or television tonight or listening to the radio or whatever other ways that we have to hide, if you're only going to substitute food for some other entertainment or some other diversion, then you should just get a supersized Big Mac meal on the way home today, because you have missed the whole point. Lent is about heading into the desert. Are you ready for that? Are you ready for the desert? A friend of mine, Father Jonathan Meyer, who came here and talked to some of our men last year, just recently constructed a Blessed Sacrament chapel very much like what we have right next door. And he was telling me recently about how people are now coming out of the woodwork, telling him, Father, I've been going to the Blessed Sacrament chapel and praying, and I've just realized that my marriage is a mess. I've realized that I'm addicted to this, or I'm addicted to that. What do I do? And we were talking about that, and certainly one of the things, I'm certainly a very big proponent of adoration, and part of that is certainly spending time in front of Jesus for them and causing conversion. But I think the other thing that is causing all of this conversion for him is that these people, for probably the first time in their life, are spending 20 minutes or 30 minutes alone, in silence. Have you ever done that? Have you spent 20 minutes or a half hour without any cover, without any distraction, just you by yourself with God? That's why Jesus went to the desert. Not to prove that he could walk through the desert and survive the experience, but because in the desert there is no cover, there's no distraction, and you're forced to look inside your soul and ask yourself where you're at and where you need to be going. So we head to the desert this Lent. Whatever forms those may be, whatever sacrifices, whatever prayers we're saying, we're all going to the desert together to spend time alone with God and to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, are we becoming like Charlie Sheen? Or are we becoming saints? And if we're not becoming saints, then what do we need to do to change that? May we have that spirit of solitude during Lent. May we approach our Lord and ask Him to be with us and to give us the salvation that we so much long for. And may we seek nourishment from this altar, the only bread that we ever need in this life, the bread of life. At this point, we will be blessing our ashes before we distribute them.